You are 51 years old, and you're dying slowly in a damp little house on a volcanic rock in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, watched around the clock by British soldiers whose only job is making sure you never build another army. 14 years earlier, you stood inside Notre Dame Cathedral, took the crown out of the Pope's hands, and put it on your own head, because apparently no one else on earth was qualified to make you emperor. Let's go back to the beginning, because you weren't supposed to be here at all. You're born in 1769 on Corsica, an island France had annexed 1 year earlier. You don't grow up speaking French. You grow up speaking Corsican Italian, in a family with a noble title and no actual money. At 9 years old, you're shipped off to a military school in mainland France, where the other cadets, wealthy, French for generations, mock your accent mercilessly. You are, by every measure that matters to them, an outsider who doesn't belong. What you do have is math. While the aristocratic cadets fence and ride horses, you're obsessively good at artillery calculations, the geometry of where a cannonball lands. Nobody realizes yet that in the coming decade, that one skill will matter more than any noble bloodline in France. In 1789, the French Revolution detonates the entire class system you've never belonged to. Promotion in the army stops being about which duke you're related to. It becomes about results. You're 24, an artillery officer nobody important has heard of, when the city of Toulon revolts and hands itself to the British Navy. You're given the artillery command almost by accident. You reposition the guns, and Toulon falls back under French control within weeks. Within a year, you go from unknown officer to brigadier general. You're 24. Most generals in Europe are twice your age and have never fired a shot themselves. Here's the part nobody warns you about ambition. It accelerates, and it never really stops. Egypt, 1798. You convince the French government to let you invade a country you have zero legitimate claim to, mostly to disrupt British trade. And, frankly, because Alexander the Great did something similar, and you clearly have opinions about your own legacy. The campaign is, militarily, a disaster. The French fleet gets destroyed at anchor. But you control the story before it reaches Paris. You abandon your own army in Egypt, sail home ahead of the news, and arrive to a France that only ever hears about your victories. Reputation, you learn early, is a production you can direct. 1799. You walk into a coup other men are already planning, and by the time the dust settles, you're not just part of the new government, you're running it. First consul. You're 30, and you already control France in everything but name. 5 years later, you decide the name should catch up to the reality. December 1804, Notre Dame. Pope Pius VII in attendance specifically to bless your coronation. Then, in front of him, in front of everyone, you take the crown out of his hands and crown yourself. The message isn't subtle. Your power comes from you, not from Rome. For the next several years you are, without exaggeration, the most powerful man in continental Europe. You rewrite France's entire legal system, the Napoleonic Code, abolishing feudal privilege, establishing equality before the law. Countries you conquer keep using it for centuries after you're gone. That part of your legacy, nobody can take back. The armies are the other half of the story, and they're relentless. Austria, Prussia, Russia, coalition after coalition forms against you, and you defeat them one after another at Austerlitz, at Jena, at Friedland. By 1810, you control or dominate most of continental Europe. You're still only 41. Spain becomes the first crack. You install your own brother as king, and the population responds not with surrender, but with years of brutal guerrilla warfare that bleeds your army slowly, a wound that never quite closes. You call it, privately, your Spanish ulcer. Then, 1812, you decide Russia needs to be forced back into your trade blockade against Britain, so you invade with over 600,000 men, the largest army Europe has ever assembled. It is, by any measure history offers, the single worst decision of your entire life. The Russians refuse to fight you head-on. They just retreat, burning their own crops and villages so you have nothing to occupy, nothing to feed your army with. You take Moscow in September only to find it already abandoned and burning. There's nothing left to conquer, and no one left to negotiate a surrender with. Winter arrives, and it's the real enemy. You begin to retreat with an army already starving, and Russian temperatures do what 6 European coalitions never managed. They destroy you completely. Of the 600,000 men who marched in, fewer than 100,000 walked back out. Most don't die in battle. They freeze, or they starve. Every enemy you've ever defeated smells blood at once. Prussia, Austria, Russia, Sweden, Britain, all of them together this time. By 1814, they're marching on Paris, and you're forced to abdicate. You're exiled to the tiny island of Elba, given a token title, Emperor of Elba, somehow both generous and an insult. You last 10 months in retirement. February 1815, you escape Elba, land in France with barely 1,000 men, and march toward Paris. The king sends soldiers to arrest you. Your former troops throw down their weapons and join you instead. You retake France without firing a single shot. It's the most audacious comeback in European history. It lasts 100 days. June 1815, you face a combined British and Prussian army near a small Belgian village called Waterloo. And this time there's no clever retreat, no miracle repositioning. You lose decisively. It's the last battle you'll ever fight. The British exile you again, this time somewhere no comeback is possible. St. Helena, a speck of volcanic rock over 1,000 miles from any continent, guarded by thousands of soldiers specifically so history doesn't repeat itself a third time. You spend 6 years there, dictating your memoirs, rewriting your own legend for the historians you know will come looking. You die in 1821 at 51. Later tests on your hair suggest arsenic exposure, possibly from the wallpaper in your damp little house, though whether that's murder or just a coincidence of Victorian home decor is still argued today. You conquered most of a continent, rewrote the legal code of half of Europe, crowned yourself emperor with your own hands, and still ended up dying watched by guards on a rock nobody had heard of before you got there. History remembers the empire. It rarely remembers how completely, in the end, you lost control of your own story. Same as the queen who came before you in this series, smuggled into a palace in a bag of laundry, several centuries earlier and several thousand miles away.